Welcome to Practicing Wholeness. My name is Brooke Snow. I'm so grateful that you're here. Today, we're going to dive into exploring the topic of what wholeness is. And this is a new perspective that I've developed over the past couple of years that has really helped me in my own journey of healing, as well as helped me have more understanding and capacity and love and acceptance for all people around me in my world and in the world. And maybe that's a good place to start is how identifying how a lot of our personal suffering in life comes from judgment, whether that's a judgment that we hold towards ourselves or it comes from judging other people, it comes from judging reality, saying that things shouldn't be the way that they are. Judgment brings a lot of suffering into our life. And the other thing to acknowledge here is that the world that we live in is a world of polarity. It is a world of opposites. And I'm sure you can relate to the feeling of contention and suffering and disconnection that can happen because of polarity in our world. If we're talking just about polarity of beliefs, this is really easy to identify in the political realm. You have the right and you have the left. And if you are clinging to one side, if you're clinging to the right side, then it's easy to think that the left side is wrong. And if you're clinging to the left side, it's easy to think that the right side is wrong. And we start to just see life and to see people in this division. And social media and the news and the narrative that we experience in our everyday life over and over again through all the information that we consume really highlights these polarities. It highlights the division. And division brings suffering because it induces a state of separation. To be able to move away from suffering, we have to be willing to move towards unity. And that means unity is being able to unite two parts. We're uniting two parts. That is what unity would be. And it's easy in our righteous thinking that we tend to assume that unity comes when everybody thinks like we do, or everybody believes like we do. Everybody sees the world in the way that we do. Like that's going to be what unifies people is if the other side, whatever that side is, if the other side will just change, if the other side will move towards my own views and my own values. And that's actually how I probably saw unity for a long time. And it's because I had judgment on what the polarities were that it seemed obvious that unity would only come when other people would change and join my side, whatever that side was. And so I want to really offer today a new perspective on polarity, a new perspective on opposites that exist. And I think that will become more clear as I dive into this framework for wholeness. Maybe a good place to start right now is simply to tune in to your own feelings, your own thoughts about polarity in general. We do live in a world of opposites, and a lot of opposites can feel pretty neutral, hot and cold, in and out. And I'm thinking more in terms of like inside and outside, whether that's inside our body or outside of our body, or inside our home or outside of our home. Other polarities might be like night and day, wet and dry. These are all pretty easy to accept, I think, in our world of like, oh yeah, we can have both. We can have both of these polarities in existence, and they both have something to offer my experience of the world. When we get into other polarities, we start to bring in a little bit more judgment about one of these polarities is the right one and the other polarity is the wrong one. And so I like to begin with something that feels really neutral because I think it's important to experience what that feels like in the body, that like, oh yes, I can actually hold both of these polarities and they both belong and I can see that they both offer something to me. And so maybe we tune into one of those neutral polarities. Maybe it's something as simple as like wet and dry. And again, I'm even thinking of hot and cold right now. And we can definitely have a preference in these neutral polarities. We can have a preference for one over the other. I know I have many friends who prefer the warm weather over the cold weather. Like there's a preference. I'm a girl who loves my hot showers. I strongly prefer my hot shower over a cold shower. And yet, like there are some things in this world that are cold that I really, really prefer cold, like ice cream or an ice cold drink on a hot summer day. Like you can see even in that example how the presence of both of those polarities can actually bring a sense of joy. The outside world is hot and I'm getting to have a nice cold treat, and that feels really balancing. It feels refreshing because I actually have the presence of both of these. So just for a moment, I invite you to just bring into your mind one of these neutral polarities, hot and cold, wet and dry, inside, outside, night and day. And just notice what it feels like in your body to presence both of these polarities. Are you able to hold both? Are you able to maybe tune in to some of the gifts that one side or the other of these polarities provides? Just noticing what it's like to be able to hold both. And maybe you do notice a little bit of preference creeping in. That's okay. Can you find something that maybe the side that you have a little more aversion to or less preference for? Is there something that you can find that it contributes in your experience of life? Okay. So those were more of our neutral polarities. When we dive into beliefs and virtues and things like that, we can tend to maybe depart a little bit from neutrality, and we start to notice a little bit more when we definitely have a preference or a conditioning towards one side of polarity than another. And so before we maybe choose one of those polarities, I want to share my framework for wholeness. And if you're watching this as video, I'm going to be sharing some visuals. Those of you who are just listening to audio, I'm going to do my very best to explain some of the visual here so that you can still hold it in your imagination. So I want you to begin first. We're looking at what it looks like on polarity. And here I have two arrows going in opposite directions. On one side, we have a polarity. On the other side, we have the opposite polarity. And I also want to draw attention that this is how our mind sees the world. Our mind naturally sees the world in these polarities. And I love to point out how the anatomy of the human brain is divided into two parts. You have your right hemisphere and you have your left hemisphere. And so it's so natural to see the world in this polarity because that is our own mind is literally divided into two. And so we're going to easily pick up on this in our worldview. We're going to see things in the polarity. We're going to see the opposites that exist. This is normal, natural. It's part of the universe that we live in. This is about the point where I'd love to bring in a quote from Aristotle, our beloved Greek philosopher. And he says, "Any virtue in excess or deficiency becomes a vice." I'm going to read that again. Any virtue in excess or deficiency becomes a vice. This may be maybe a little bit of a mind bender for some of us. I know for me, I've always thought of, can you have too much of a certain virtue? An example I like to bring in with this is like, could you have too much gratitude? I can see how a deficiency in gratitude could be a vice, but could you have an excess? Is that even possible to have an excess of gratitude? And the answer is yes, you can have too much gratitude. Maybe that'll be a fun polarity to explore in an upcoming episode. In fact, this is something I want to do as part of a series on this podcast, is to explore these type of polarities and see how it is that we can move into excess or deficiency and what that brings up. But anyway, be thinking about this. Any virtue in excess or deficiency becomes a vice. And we tend to do this when we cling to one side of a polarity or we have an aversion to the other side. If I'm going to keep with my example of gratitude, maybe I position a polarity to gratitude as discontent. If I'm grateful for something, I'm really content. I'm content and I see the good in my circumstances. And the polarity of that would be like, I'm discontent. There's something, maybe I judge that there's something missing in my circumstances. Maybe I see a deficiency. And so we've got these two positioned on either side of the polarity. Maybe we've grown up with conditioning where we want to like cling to one over the other. I definitely want to be able to have gratitude. And maybe I have a judgment towards discontent that like, oh, it's a terrible thing for me to be discontent. I just need to be grateful for what I have. And so we can start to see how this plays out really subtly, like it's a really nuanced thing, but we can tend to cling to one side and have aversion towards the other. This is just something we want to start to notice and to start to pay attention to. When we cling to only one side and we have aversion towards the other, we will experience the shadow side of that polarity. This is something that feels really radical from like the worldview that I had for most of my life. And it comes about because of the excess or the deficiency on that scale of polarity. Going with our same example of gratitude, like how could you actually have a shadow come out of gratitude if you're only clinging to that? And one example might be that I'll just say maybe you're in a job that you've been in for a long time. It's provided well for you. It's giving you lots of opportunities. And maybe you notice that you're not as like excited about doing the work as you were before, but you just keep telling yourself, I just need to be grateful. Like I should be grateful that I even have a job. And I should be grateful because I've developed good relationships with the people that I work with. And I've had all these great opportunities and it's really made me who I am. Like I need to just be grateful. And when we are clinging just to being grateful at the exclusion of acknowledging any discontent that might be present, what could happen is maybe there is some divine discontent happening. Maybe it's part of our own life path that we develop a little bit of discontent so that we start to ask some questions, that we start to notice like, well, maybe something needs to change. Maybe it is the job that needs to change, or maybe it's just how I'm approaching it, or how maybe there's a different type of work that I could bring into my experience that would help lighten things up, add a little spark back into the experience. Like the same thing could be said for like a personal relationship, right? When we can get into the shadow side of gratitude of just I should just be grateful. I need to cling to that gratitude so that I am not going to acknowledge that there's some discontent that's here. But when we start to look at things, we can start to see how maybe the discontent can be little breadcrumbs that lead us to change something, to tweak something, to have an adventure, to like be creative and evolve, because we're meant to evolve. When we're just in the shadow of gratitude and only gratitude, we don't really change very much because we tell ourselves we should just be grateful. So what it's important to start to notice is that each polarity has a shadow, and the shadow comes when you're only clinging to one side. You're excluding the other polarity. You're only clinging to one side. You are living in the shadow of that polarity. If there's a shadow, there's also a gift. There is a gift that is in each of these polarities. Every polarity offers a gift. And oftentimes, the gift isn't discovered until we move through the shadow. Every shadow has a gift. We move through the shadow to be able to find what the gift is. And on the visual here, I'm just showing that what we want to do is, if we've got these polarities, if we're only on one side of the polarity, we have the shadow. To get towards the gift, we actually have to come away from the edges. We have to come more towards the center. We're actually going to move towards the middle way, where we bring in the gift that one polarity has, we bring in the gift that the other polarity has, and we're able to unite both sides of this spectrum that seems like opposites, but when we transcend the shadow and include the gift that they each hold, that's when we come into a place of wholeness. We bridge both sides by moving away from the edge and moving towards the gifts that they both offer. We move towards the middle. And in my visual here, I have us moving towards the heart. I love using the heart as a symbol to me for wholeness, because just like I mentioned the anatomy of the brain, the mind as a divided organ, the heart is an organ of unity. It's not divided. It is symbolically, I see the heart as the space within us that has the capacity to be able to hold both sides. It has the capacity to hold the opposites, to hold the contradictions, to hold the contraries of any polarity that exists. It can hold both. And it holds both as we move towards the middle. We transcend those shadow aspects when we are in judgment, where we're judging one as better than the other or more righteous than the other, or whatever the judgment may be. And we see that each polarity offers us something, and we bring the gifts of both of those sides into unity. We bring it into the heart. In this regard, we are integrating what each side offers. So I hope that that was useful to be able to go through this framework for wholeness. And just a quick, short recap, we have polarities that exist on a spectrum. Anytime we cling to one or we have an aversion towards the other, which comes from our judgment, we're going to be in the shadow side of that polarity. We get the gift of a polarity when we move away from the edge. We're moving more towards the middle, and we bring the gifts that each side offers into wholeness. When we're only living in one side, we're living in halfness. We're not living in wholeness. We're living in halfness. So I am excited to be able to explore, like I say, as a series, a lot of these polarities. We used gratitude and discontent as an example. There's so many others that I want to explore in exploring abundance and scarcity. There's actually a shadow side to both if you're on the polarity extreme, and there's a gift that both offers. That may sound like, what? There's a gift that scarcity offers? Yes, there is. Oneness and separateness. That's another one I'm excited to explore. Unconditional love and conditional love. And I can already feel my own judgment coming up, like, what? There's a gift from conditional love? Yes, there is. And so I can tell just in talking about some of these polarities, I can sense in my own body right now, it's not neutral anymore for me. And maybe you kind of feel that happening for you too, noticing oh, I definitely am feeling more clinging to one side and an aversion to one side of that polarity. And this is just, it's something that's really interesting to me that I want to explore. And I believe, as I've done this own work for myself, as I have looked for what is the gift that comes from each side, I have been able to experience an expansion of my own heart, to be able to experience what it's like to be able to hold opposites. It has allowed me to have more acceptance. It's allowed me to have more acceptance for myself because I actually have contradicting parts within me. And as I allow those contradictions to exist, I actually am able to more easily allow the contradictions that exist in other people, in other points of view, and in the world. And so I invite you to join me on this journey of practicing wholeness so we can start to explore living more from the heart rather than living from the mind. As long as we live from a place of judgment and clinging to only one side or the other, we're going to suffer and we're going to have division in our world. I think the art of wholeness, practicing wholeness, the art of being able to see the good that exists in both sides and in polarity is one of the most needed skill sets in our world right now. And I really believe that as we do this work for ourselves, it does have a ripple effect. It really can be a catalyst for creating more unity and more peace in our own hearts, in our own families, in our own communities, and in the world at large. And so with that, I thank you for joining me in this discussion. Really getting clear on our own experience with these polarities is something that I'm excited to be able to do in community. So when I present one of these polarities to go a little bit deeper into, I actually am going to do it as a live community experience in which I call a creation circle, where you are invited to be able to come and join me on a Zoom call, and we will do some personal inquiry. We'll do some discussion. We're going to explore the shadow side and the gift side of the polarity for that particular circle. The first one I have is coming up next week. We're going to be discussing the polarity of insourcing versus outsourcing. That could be insourcing love, where we are drawing love from within ourselves versus needing other people outside of us to love us. That would be outsourcing. It could be insourcing our guidance and our answers that we're seeking in life versus, outsourcing answers and guidance. And I think this is a really important polarity to be able to explore. And we'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about the shadow side of both. We'll be talking about the gift that both offers and exploring how we can live with more wholeness in bringing the two together. So, if that is of interest to you, I invite you to join me live in discussing that. It is a free experience. I just know that podcasting can be super solo and lonely sometimes. And so I'm wanting to change that up for myself and have more connection. And I think it'll be a great opportunity to build community around the art of practicing what wholeness is in our own life. So thank you for being here. I look forward to these other discussions in the future. The light in me honors the light in you. Namaste.